Hello all and welcome back. There are times when you want to limit a cell based on a certain criteria or certain set of rules. It could be as simple as choosing from a list of values or limiting a cell so that the user can only enter, let's say, a whole number or a decimal number or even, let's say, a date or a time. We will cover all of this in today's video. You can also show a pop-up when the user selects a cell so that the user knows what the user is supposed to do in that cell. And by chance, if the user does not enter the values which meet the criteria that you have set, then the user will get an error alert. So like I said, in this video, I will take you through data validation. I'll cover a lot of details. So let's begin. Here I have a small table which I will use for data validation demonstration. Let's say I want my employees to fill this table for the records. Let me take you through this table and explain the set of rules that we are going to enforce. Here I want the employees to select the name from the list which we will provide. And here I want the employees to select their gender again from the list which we will provide. There's a reason why I'm taking two examples to demonstrate the list validation. We will come to that in a moment. And here I want the employees to enter their number of siblings. This cell will only accept whole numbers, obviously. Here I want the employees to enter their height in centimeters. This cell can accept whole numbers or decimals. Here I want the employees to enter their date of birth. This cell will only accept dates. In this section, I want the employees to enter 5 hobbies. We will use a formula to check if the user is not duplicating any hobby, which means this range cannot have duplicate values. Here, I want the employees to enter their comment if they have any. This cell can only accept, say, a maximum of 200 characters. We will enforce that. And finally, here I want the employees to enter the time when they fill this application. This cell will only accept time which is greater than equal to now. So if you must have noticed, my table is based on 7 kinds of validation criteria that we can set. This is the first criteria where you can select the name from the list. This is the second criteria where you can enter only whole numbers. This is the third where you can enter decimals. This is for date. This is for custom. This is for text of specific length. And this is for time. So there are 7 kinds of validation criteria that you can set. So let's start coding. We will now launch the Visual Basic Editor. If you're not sure what Visual Basic Editor is, then I recommend watching the video Visual Basic Editor and Introduction. Let's press the shortcut key Alt F11 to launch the Visual Basic Editor. Here I have 8 modules. We will go through them one by one. But before we do that, let's understand what is the syntax of adding a validation. To add a validation to a range, we have to use validation.add method. And the syntax is expression.add type alert style operator formula1 formula2, where expression is a variable that represents a validation object. Type is a required parameter. It's the validation type. Alert style is an optional parameter. Using this, you can set the validation alert style. It can be one of the following Excel-VBA alert style constants: Excel valid alert information, Excel valid alert stop, or Excel valid alert warning. Depending on what you choose, the message box that pops up will have the relevant icon. For example, valid alert stop will have a red icon, information will have an info icon, and a warning will have a yellow icon. Operator is also an optional parameter. The data validation operator can be one of the following Excel format condition operator constants: Excel between, Excel equal, Excel greater equal, Excel less equal, Excel not between, or Excel not equal. We will be using some of these in the demonstration. Formula 1 is again optional. This is the first part of the data validation equation. Value must not exceed 255 characters. So remember that. Formula 2 is an optional parameter. It is the second part of data validation equation where the operator is Excel between or Excel not between. For the rest of the operator constant, this argument is ignored. The add method requires different arguments. Depending on the validation type, as I mentioned that there are 7 kinds of validation criteria that you can set. Based on what you want, any of the following arguments can be used. I will be taking you through each one of them when I demonstrate different examples. So in this video, we will understand all 7 kinds of validation criteria that you can set. So let's go back. I'm going to open the first module. You can either double click on this module or you can right click on it and click on View Code. Before I explain what this code does, let me show you visually how data validation dialog box looks like. Once you understand the different elements of the validation dialog box, this code will be much more easier to understand. So let's go back to the worksheet. So if you go to the data tab and if you click on data validation, you will be presented with a data validation dialog box. Here there are 3 different tabs: settings, input message, and error alert. Let's understand settings first. Here you can select any of the 7 validation criteria. And here you can choose any of the Excel format condition operator constants like between, equal, greater than equal to, based on whatever you select in the validation criteria. So for example, if I select whole number, you can choose what do you want to do with the data. Do you want to choose a whole number which is between something or not between something or equal to something? So we will cover all of this in detail. Similarly, if you select, let's say, list, you get these 2 options, which is ignore blank in cell drop down, and then this is the source. So let's change this back to any value. This is the input message. So whatever you type here will be displayed when the user selects a cell. And in this section, you can choose the style that you want to show. Suppose you want to show stop, then the red icon will be displayed. If you want to show warning, then the yellow icon. And if you want to show information, then the blue icon. In this section, you can specify the title and the error message, which will pop up when the user enters a value which does not meet the criteria which you have set. So this basic thing is clear to you. We have settings, we have input box, and we have error alert. So we will be tweaking these settings from the VBA code. I'm going to cancel this. Let's go back to the code. Here I have declared an object variable for my worksheet. Here I am initializing the object variable. And here I am saying with.range c2.validation.delete. So the very first step is I'm deleting any existing validation if it is there. Why C2? Because if we go back, this is C2, this cell. This is the cell that we are working with. This is where we want to show a list. Here I have specified my type as Excel validate list. So if you remember, a couple of minutes ago I was talking to you about the validation type arguments. So for list, the type is Excel validate list. Here I have set the alert style as Excel valid alert stop. This will show a message box with the red icon which I showed a couple of moments earlier. This is my formula 1. Here what I have done is I have mentioned equal to employee names. Employee names is a named range. So if I go back to the worksheet, if you go to sheet 2, you will notice that I have some employee names. What I've done is I've created a named range, employee names. If you click on that, you will notice that it selects all these names. I will not get too much into named range in this video. In fact, my next video will be dedicated to named range. I will talk about named ranges much more in detail. Named range in short can help when you have, let's say, a lot of names. In such a scenario, named ranges are beneficial because you can use one name which will have all these names. So it is much more easier to address all these names in data validation. Like I mentioned, we will cover named ranges much more in detail in the next video. So let's go back. Here we are setting .ignore blank is equal to true. If you look at this image, this property tweaks this setting. When you set this property to true, then blank values are permitted by the range data validation. And if you set it to false, then the user cannot enter blank values. Here we are setting .incel dropdown is equal to true. If you look at this image, this property tweaks this setting. When you set this property to true, then data validation displays a drop-down list that contains acceptable values. If you set it to false, then no list is displayed, but the user still have to select from the values from the criteria. In such a case, obviously it does not make sense setting this to false because the user obviously cannot see what all is there in the list. This section is for the input message tab. If you look at this image, these property tweaks these settings. Here you can set the message title and message text. Similarly, this section is for the error alert tag. If you look at this image, these property tweaks these settings. Here as well, you can set the message title and message text. Let's now run it and see how the code sets the data validation in cell C2. To run the code, click on the Run Sub-User Form button or simply press the shortcut key F5. Now if you go back to the worksheet, you will notice that in sheet 1, cell C2 has the instructions. So if you click outside and if you click again, you will get the prompt, select your name from the list. This is what we had set in the instructions message box. And now if you click on this, you will get the list of employee names from which you can select it. Let's select a value. So it allows us to select a particular employee name. Now if you try to type something else in the cell, see what happens the moment you press enter. You get an error message saying that you need to select your name from the list. And the title of the message box is invalid name, which we had set in the code. And you also see that it shows a red cross icon, which we had set as alert style. So I'm going to cancel this. Now let's go to sheet 2 for a moment. Now we used a named range for the employee names because it is easier to pass a big list using a named range. Now there are scenarios where the list may contain 3 to 4 options. For such a scenario, named range doesn't make sense. Not that you can't create it, you can. But for demonstration purpose, I'm going to share an example which doesn't use a named range. So let's go to sheet 1. This is the gender section. Let's say you want to show only 4 options in the drop-down list for gender. And the 4 options are do not want to say, female, male, and the 4th option is others. In such a case, you can, instead of a named range, pass a comma delimited list to the formula 1 parameter. So let's go back and let's do that. Let's open the second module. If you notice, most of the code is the same as module 1. However, there are a couple of differences. Here I am applying the validation to cell C3. And instead of a named range, here I am using a comma delimited string. Also, the title and the message for the input and error sections are also changed. So I'm going to run this now. Now if you go back to the worksheet, you will notice that C3 has an instructions now because that cell is selected. If you click outside again, the instructions will disappear. If you click again, the instructions will come back again. It says select your gender from the list. So here I can choose any one of these options that I want. So these two are data validation drop-down lists. One uses a named range and the second one uses a comma delimited string. Moving on to the third section, which is siblings. We want the user to enter the number of siblings here. So let's go back and view the code of third module. Again, everything is almost the same as we saw in the previous two modules. However, the type now becomes Excel validate whole number. So if you remember, in the old one, it was Excel validate list. So this will keep on changing for the rest of the modules. Since we are dealing with whole numbers, so we are using Excel validate whole number. I've kept the alert style as alert stop, so I'm not going to change that. However, you'll see something new here, which is an operator. So I'm using an operator Excel greater equal. So what I want is, I want the user to enter a number which is greater than equal to 0. If you also noticed that now this section does not have in cell dropdown is equal to true. That's because we are not going to show any list. So that part is also not here. The title and the message for the input and error is also changed based on what we are trying to do here. So let's run this. If you go back, now you will notice that the moment I select the third cell, I get the message, enter the number of siblings you have. Now in the code, I have set a criteria that the user can enter any number greater than equal to 0. So if you try to enter 1.5, you'll not be able to, because obviously you cannot have 1.5 siblings. You can only have 1, 0, 2, 7, 8 siblings. So we have restricted the entry in this cell to whole numbers. Similarly, if you try to type some text, let's say Sid, it will not let you enter any text. Only whole numbers greater than equal to 0. Let's go back. One more thing. Here we used Excel validate whole number. As I mentioned earlier, you can use any of these operators. For operators like Excel between, Excel not between, you have to specify two values. For example, if I want the user to enter a number which is between 0 and 15, then this is how I would do it. I will comment this line for a moment, and I'm going to copy this and I will paste it again. I'll make the changes to the new code so that I can revert to the old code. Here, what I will do now is, I will use the operator Excel between. And now I will introduce formula 2. The first one will be 0 and the second one will be 15. So what I want is, I want to restrict the entry in the cell to a number which is between 0 and 15. And if you try to add anything other than that, then you will get an error. So I'm going to run this. Let's go back. Now, if you try to enter, let's say 1, it will let you. If you try to enter 15, it will let you. See what happens the moment I type 16. I get an error. Let's go back. Here, even though it says between, but these two numbers, 0 and 15, are also included. So you can enter a number from 0 to 15. The next cell where we want to add validation is C5. Here we will accept an input for height. Now, height can be in decimals. So we will now add a criteria so that the user can enter decimals here. Let's go back and check the fourth module. Again, everything remains the same except this part. This now becomes Excel validate decimal. Operator Excel greater than equal. Now, here I have set as 30. So I'm assuming that the shortest height somebody can have is 30 centimeters. If you want to change this number, then feel free to do that. Here what I have done is I have added a validation rule that whatever value you enter has to be greater than or equal to 30 centimeters. Again, the title and the message changes for input and error accordingly. So I'm going to run this. Let's go back. So it says enter your height in centimeters, instructions. So if I enter, let's say 35, it will let me. If I enter 35.58, it will let me. But if I enter 29, I will get an error. When you limit the cell to accept only decimals, then both whole numbers and decimals will be accepted. The next cell where we will add a criteria is cell C6 for date of birth. Here we want the user to enter his or her date of birth. So the validation that we will set for this cell is that the user can only enter a date. This cell can only accept dates. Let's go back and view the code for the fifth module. You will notice that the structure is the same as the previous modules. The only difference is here we are using Excel validate decimal and other options. Here we are using Excel validate date. You will also notice that I'm using an operator Excel between, and I have formula 1 and formula 2 parameters with dates mentioned. I could have directly typed the date here, but it can get tricky while working with dates because of regional settings. So instead, I'm using a formula here. What I'm saying is that the date has to be greater than equal to 1st of January 1970 and less than equal to 1st of January 2002. This is just a random date that I took. Feel free to change it to whatever you want. Here the title and message have also been tweaked as per the requirement. So now let's run this. So if you go back, now the instruction shows enter your date of birth. So if you enter any date after 1970, it will accept it. But if you enter any date after 1st Jan 2002, then it will not accept it. So if I type 1/1/2022, it will not accept it. It will give you an error. So here we saw how we can limit the data in a cell and ensure that only the dates can be entered. The next validation that we need is to check if the user has not entered duplicate hobbies in C7 to C11. For that, we will use custom validation. So let's go back and view the code for the sixth module. Here, the type is now Excel validate custom. And instead of one single cell, the range is now C7 to C11. And in the formula 1 parameter, I have specified a formula. I'm checking whether the formula evaluates to less than equal to 1. Till the time this formula remains true, the validation will succeed, which means that you can have only unique values. The moment you have a duplicate, this formula will return a false and the input will fail the validation. I have also tweaked the title and the message for input and error. So now let's run this. If you go back, the instruction is enter your hobby. Now let's enter singing. Okay, it accepted it. Let's say coding. And if you enter, let's say singing again, see what happens. You have already entered this hobby, so you cannot enter it again. So what I've done here is I've limited the way you can enter values in these 5 cells. You cannot enter duplicate values. So for that, I used COUNTIF formula with Excel validate custom as the type. The next cell where we will apply the validation is for comments. Here we will limit the number of characters the user can enter. Let's say we do not want the user to enter more than 200 characters. So let's go back and let's see how we can achieve this. We will now view the code for the 7th module. Here I have my range C12. This is where I am applying the validation. This time I'm using the type as Excel validate text length. The operator is Excel less than equal to. So the constant for that is Excel less equal. And the formula 1 parameter is 200. So what I'm saying is till the time the text length is less than equal to 200, it's okay. The moment you cross 200 characters, you will get an error. The title and the message for the input and error have been adjusted accordingly. So let's run this. Let's go back. If you click on this, I'm greeted with the instruction. Okay. Let's say I want to type, this is my comment. If I press enter, it will accept it. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a formula here to keep a track of how many characters I have entered. I'm using the len formula. So till now 18 characters have been entered. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and I'll keep on pasting it. Okay, let's see what happens. So 146 I've reached. Okay, let me also format it so that this gets wrapped. Perfect. And now I'll again paste it here. 200. So now the total character length is 200. If I type one more character and if I press enter, it will not accept it. Let's see. I paste it one more time and I press enter. And I get the error which says comment should not be more than 200 characters. So you cannot enter more than 200 characters because of the criteria that we set. The last validation that we will do is for cell C13 for the time. Here what I want is the user enters the time specifying when was this application filled. The criteria that I will set here is that the time whatever the user enters have to be greater than equal to the current time. So the user cannot insert a time from the past. So let's go back and now let's check the last module. Here now the type is Excel validate time and this is for cell C13. What I'm doing here is I have set the operator as Excel greater equal, which means greater than equal to. And I'm using a formula for the formula 1 parameter. I'm using a time formula which will calculate the current time. So what I'm saying is whatever time the user is entering has to be greater than equal to current time. The title and the message have been adjusted accordingly. Now let's run this. Let's go back to the worksheet. The current time right now is 1 in the morning and 44 minutes. So if I type 1:43 and if I press enter, it will not accept it. It will say enter time which is greater than equal to current time. If I enter 1:44, it's still not accepted because the time is 1:44 and 33 seconds. So what I will do is I will type 1:45 and it will accept it because this time is greater than the current time. Obviously this does not make any sense in the real world scenario. You can use this type of validation to accept, let's say, appointments, meeting requests and so on. So what I've done here is I have shown you the 7 kind of validation criteria and I broke it up in 8 different modules so that I can explain each one of them in detail. I hope with this example it is very clear to you how, when and where to use these 7 kind of validation. Time for a quick recap. In this video we learned how to limit data in a cell based on a certain criteria or certain set of rules. We also discovered that we can have 7 different types of validation criteria, whether it is limiting the cell to whole numbers, decimals, date, time, etc. etc. We also learned how to enforce the validation using a formula. So I hope this video was easy to understand, but if you still have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, or you can also email me on support@teamexcel.com. I also have a Facebook page, feel free to join that, and if you have any questions on VBA, please post it there. I will be more than happy to help you out. Just a quick reminder, I will be posting 2 videos every week, one on Monday and the other on Thursday. So if you would like to extend support towards this channel, then go ahead, watch a couple of videos, drop a couple of likes, and if you're really serious about learning Visual Basic Programming from scratch, then definitely see the playlist, because that is where I have arranged the videos in a specific sequence. Those videos will help you out. So watch them, drop a couple of likes there as well. And if you still have not subscribed to this channel, then go ahead and subscribe to this channel by clicking on the bell icon. Now, if you remember while explaining data validation, I mentioned named ranges. So in the next video, I will cover named ranges in detail. I will talk to you about how to create them, how to resize them, how to delete them, how to do so many other things with them. So stating